Welcome to Windows on the World. This week we're talking to Steve Headley, Assistant General Secretary of the RMT Union. And first of all, we're going to talk about the benefits of renationalisation. This is something that Jeremy Corbyn's talking about and something that the powers that shouldn't be are really against, and we're going to find out why. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Mark.
Hi. So, tell us a bit about your background, first of all, and why you think that the railway should be renationalised. Just give us, for people out there who may not know who you are.
Okay, I'm the Assistant General Secretary of the RMT Union. That's a transport union.
Yeah.
We've got about 84,000 members, and we organise in the railway industry, the tubes, the buses, and the seafarers and offshore. I've been a member of the union now for nearly 30 years. I was in a nationalised industry. I worked for British Rail. And I've just seen over the years, and this isn't just my personal opinion, it's documented, it's factual, that the industry now is not being run in the interests of the public. It's being run in the interests of the train operating companies, which are private companies. A lot of them, ironically, have national railways like Deutsche Bahn, Bilio, and European national railways, investing in the train operating companies and making so much money that they can subsidise fares in their own countries. So that's the situation that we're in. And the government actually did a report called the McNulty Report. It was about privatisation, and that report found that it was between 3 and 4 times more expensive to run a private railway system than it was to run a nationalised system. And of course that's accounting for inflation and all of the price rises that have happened. Still over 3 times cheaper to run a nationalised system. And I mean, the reason for that isn't really rocket science. I mean, if you go into business, you go into business not to help out the public. You go into business to make money. And if you're making money and withdrawing billions of pounds a year for your shareholders, that money can't be spent on infrastructure, it can't be spent on staff, it can't be spent on new rolling stock, new trains. So that is the reason really that we're advocating a return to a renationalised railway.
Yeah, a lot of this is about accountability really, isn't it? Because renationalisation would make the railway companies much more accountable. Could you give an example of why that would be beneficial to the public? Because they're not getting this side of the story at all, are they?
Well, if we look at just what's happened now with Southern Rail, we've got an appalling service, the highest fares probably in the world, in Britain. We've got people cannot get in on Southern trains, they're losing their jobs, they're losing their livelihoods over this. I think that they're cancelling 341 trains per day, even when we're not on strike. On top of that, they're trying to get rid of all the guards from the trains, safety critical guards from the trains. They're trying to get rid of all the station staff, trying to get rid of dispatch staff, trying to pare it down where it'll be absolutely unsafe for the public to use. Now, that's bad enough. Their parent company have made £100 million profit, and the government have just subsidised Govia by giving them another £20 million taxpayers' money. That's on top of the 1.2 billion that the government gives them every year. So how can this be value for money? I mean, anybody can see that this is an absolute rip-off. The public are paying twice. They're paying, first of all, they subsidise the company, and then they're paying top-ups. They give the company more money on top of that.
I suppose a lot of the public would say, well, why do they do it then? Have you got an answer to that?
Well, if you look at it, it's a lot of these companies have made donations to the Conservative Party, and I think it's what we have. We don't have even a business case for privatisation. What we have is a kleptocracy. There are people who are stealing money from the taxpayers of this country and using it for their own ends. The salaries at the top end of this, people are on £500,000, £750,000, with bonuses to take over £1.5 million home directors from these companies. It's absolutely appalling. And that money obviously could be spent on the infrastructure and on the trains and on adequate staffing for stations.
I think this is a really important point, because when people talk about the 1%, this is what we're talking about, isn't it? We're talking about a nation now, and it's a worldwide thing that's going on really with corporatisation and globalisation, is that people are just getting poorer and poorer in real terms. And when you're talking about the rail fare increases, I mean, this happened on the tube, didn't it? Because basically they're trying to get everyone, it's going to be an Oyster card, then it's going to be basically contactless, completely contactless straight to your bank account. It's a slightly different issue, but it comes into the same thing. If you just arrive in London from another country and you buy a ticket, you're going to be shocked at the price of a tube ticket, aren't you?
Well, absolutely. It's the highest fares anywhere in Europe. I think outside Japan it's sort of comparable with Japan, but it would be the highest fares in the world. We're not serving anybody except the few people who are in directorships and that are getting donations from the train operating companies. Really, the public are suffering massively. We've got a worse service than we've ever had. We've got the highest prices, and trains are jammed. They're packed to the rafters in the trains. You know, we've got record numbers of passengers using trains, because the traffic volumes just can't keep up. You can't drive anywhere as fast as you can get by train. But I think that the public are getting a really, really bad deal.
Yeah, it's so it's uneconomically viable. It's not economically viable. So it's uneconomical to do what they're doing, and it's destroying the livelihoods of people, and that's quite an important point, is it? Because people aren't being able to get into work now, and which is a totally ridiculous situation. I never imagined it would be like that. And when you're looking at the cost of it, it's all stacked against the public.
Well, that's right, and I mean, this is where you see the political interference, because if the Department of Transport, if the government weren't dictating to go via Thameslink that they had to do these things, that franchise would have been taken off them months ago. There is no way that they would have been able to run the level service that they've been running and get away with it. I mean, they would be breaching every penalty point in their contract. So, I mean, the government are definitely behind this, and I think that when they've just handed over £20 million extra to the company, it just proves a point.
Yeah, well, the thing what we're seeing now is we're seeing that everything seems to look better. We're seeing this everywhere. We're seeing infrastructure actually being changed for the worse, but looking better. And this goes into transport. Our links, people who want to use private transport are getting completely penalised now. Roads are actually getting narrowed with these huge pavements. We've talked about this a lot. And it's about closing huge areas off. So they're forcing people onto public transport. Now, if this had been thought out, I would assume that the public transport links and the cost of it would be managed much differently. So what do you think on this? Do you think this is just a chaotic agenda, or do you think there's something else behind it?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that there is absolute chaos. The free market is chaos. The fact that people are advocating this free market is it's somehow going to be the cure for everything. It's nonsense. I mean, you have to plan your journey to work. You have to plan a trip. Why would that be any different with the whole transport system? You've got to plan it. You can't leave it open to the free market. You have to have a publicly owned, publicly financed and publicly planned transport system. That's the only way you're actually going to do it. I mean, one of the cosmetic things you referred to, Great Western Railways, who were known as First Great Western, have changed their name. They became such a toxic franchise that they changed their name and spent millions of pounds going around rebranding and putting a lick of paint on things. Their services are still appalling. We did a survey that the intercity trains that run from Bristol to London actually went faster in the 1970s than they did now. So that's a sort of service that privatisation has actually brought in. They can run those trains faster. Of course they can. But what happens is, for every minute that they're delayed, they get a penalty point. So what they do is they make the journey times such that it's very, very seldom that they'll get delayed.
Yeah, so the train takes twice as long because it's their fault and they're late in the first place. But so the journey times increase. Yeah, it is quite nonsensical, and I suppose more people are getting a grasp on this now because they are suffering from it, aren't they?
Well, I think that they are getting a grasp. I think polls are consistently showing over 70% are in favour of rail renationalisation. The Corbyn administration, the Labour Party, have said that they'll bring it back into public ownership. And I think that's having a massive resonance with people out there. I think it's what people want to see. They're fed up of being ripped off. They're fed up of money going out of the country. And this isn't a xenophobic thing, but it's why should people in London or Britain pay for lower fares in Germany? It's just nonsense, isn't it?
Well, of course it is, and the mere fact you have to say this isn't xenophobic shows you what kind of controlled environment we're in, because it's just that's just a sensible statement, you know. I mean, the whole point is that if things were renationalised and put back into the hands of the government, then there would be some accountability, and a lot of this is about accountability, really, isn't it? You know, so as far as the staff goes and the people within the union, what's the morale like?
Well, I have to say, on Southern at the minute, the morale amongst the staff is rock bottom. It really is. I mean, people were bullied at the start of this dispute. They had their parking permits taken off them. They had their staff travel passes taken off them.
Really?
Their families and their children also had their staff passes, the leisure travel, taken off them. And it was only after days out on action, days of strike action, when they saw that wasn't actually going to break a strike, that they gave them back. It's shocking sort of Victorian workhouse industrial relations from the management side. Yeah. But, you know, our members are determined to fight on. There's nothing that we can say that we're not getting a pay raise out of this, we're not getting extra holidays out of this. This is really about saving jobs and fundamentally about public safety. And that's what our members care about.
Well, we've seen this dirty tricks campaign being played out, and I think it's with Corbyn, it's become very polarised, and we've been reporting on that. And there's a lot of the tactics are now exposed. So what you've said there will probably surprise a lot of people, but victimising people's families who are trying to take action and stuff like that. I think that's what the public really should know about, because it's not just people who work for the rail companies who are going to suffer this, it's everybody. This is a corporate agenda that's going to take everything people have got, and it's impoverishing people dramatically. So, thanks, Steve. We're going to be back after the break. So here we are at T Chances at 3 days of punk, and we have Spiz Energy here.
I've been here before. I like it. It feels like a European venue. You know how in Europe you get this sort of thing where you got the market going on today, and you got 2 stages. There's a bit of ramshackle. Although this is quite nice and tidy up here, but downstairs it's a bit ramshackle. But then places that we kind of play, the sort of venues that let us play, do get heavily used, worn, tired. But as long as the PA works and the beer's cold, it's a hit.
Welcome back to Windows on the World. We're now joined by Piers Corbyn, a regular on the show, with Steve Headley, the Assistant General Secretary of the RMT Union, which, although not affiliated to the Labour Party, actually supports Jeremy Corbyn. So, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, Steve, we're going to talk about a big dirty tricks campaign, and I don't say that lightly or frivolously, because it's been proven that there's been a big dirty tricks campaign against Jeremy Corbyn, and you obviously support Corbyn and his policies. So can you tell us a bit about what's been happening with the votes, because a lot of these votes and people have been stopped from voting? How's this affected the union?
Well, firstly, our union aren't affiliated to the Labour Party, as you pointed out, but Jeremy and John have been the chair and secretary of our parliamentary group for some number of years now. They've stood on picket lines with us. They've always supported our struggle. They want a renationalised railway. So what we have done is supported Jeremy's campaign, both by putting boots on the ground for him, sending emails, doing phone banks, and by actually making a substantial donation to his campaign. So that's where we are with him, and we've actually just brought in a policy at our last AGM. They only support Labour Party candidates that support Jeremy Corbyn and John MacDonald. So that's what we are, supporting Jeremy. But dozens of our members, probably hundreds of our members now, have been barred from voting on spurious grounds that some of them have liked Green Party activists. They put a like on Facebook on some Green Party post, or they've liked something from another party, National Shop Stewards Network or Trade Union and Socialist Coalition, they've liked something on there, they've put a comment on them. So they've been barred from voting, although they're actually Labour Party members, from voting in the election on these grounds. One of our members has been a Labour Party member for 38 years. And he's been active in his local branch and his trades council and all the rest of it. And he happened to put a like on someone who was standing for the Trade Union Socialist Coalition because it was a friend of his. He liked one of his statements on Facebook, and he's been barred from the Labour Party and actually suspended from the Labour Party. So we think it's an absolute abysmal carry on. It's gerrymandering, and there's no other term to describe it. It's gerrymandering. It's trying to inflict. I don't even think that they know they're not going to defeat Jeremy Corbyn, but what they're trying to do is minimise the scale of defeat for Owen Smith. I think that's what they're trying to do, and prepare the ground for people like Tom Watson to come in later and try to steal the party through the back door by saying that only 172 MPs can vote for the shadow cabinet.
I think these tactics have been roundly exposed now, but we're still getting this nonsense from the mainstream media, and I'd just like you to address this as well, because you've been very much attacked by them, haven't you? They've got it in for you as soon as you get on there, especially people like LBC, you know. I mean, but the attacks are so ridiculous, and it's the same with the attacks on Jeremy Corbyn. They've become exposed. So what's your take on it now? Are you thinking that, maybe the tactics against me have been exposed, or are you still having problems?
Well, the thing is, look, personally, the way I see it, if the media, if people like the Daily Mail and the Sun ever start writing anything good about me, I'll be worried then. But seriously, it does have a knock-on effect, because not everybody in our union's political, not every worker is political, and what they try to do is they try to have this agenda where people are actually acting against their own self-interest. Trade unions are not their enemies. I'm not their enemy. I'm out there fighting for health and safety and for better conditions, not just for our members, for every working class person, and safety for every working class person travelling to work. Now, why would I become the bad guy? And why isn't the bad guy a tax exile like Richard Branson, who's getting billions in public money to sit out on an island in the Caribbean
and run full trains around the country without seats on them?
Yes, but he's a self-made billionaire. Don't you understand?
But the astounding thing about the anti-democracy and the hypocrisy of the media is if this was happening in a Middle Eastern former dictatorship, or in a trade union, if you were barring people from voting, the BBC would have, they'd be slaughtering people. And Owen Smith would be raging in Parliament, grabbing the mace, hitting people, fighting for democracy. Well, but the media are trying to put a lid on it. They're trying to hide it, and it is one of the, in terms of democratic functionings of aspects of Britain, it's, I don't know, it must be the worst thing that's happened this century, the way it's going. It is really an utter abomination.
Well, when you think about it, this is
hundreds of thousands of people being banned from voting, even when they're just proper members.
This is what they were accusing Gaddafi of. Well, apparently he wasn't doing it anyway, but now maybe that's what they've done. They've transported an idea that they had over here, But it's to be serious about it, we are seeing the end of what people would call democracy, really, and I think that's very interesting, the way it's been completely polarised and it's going against them now. So that's where I'd just like to get your impression of that. Do you see things changing on the ground at all?
Well, I think the mask has slipped, hasn't it? Yeah. I mean, it's they had this facade that they were totally democratic. Let's all let the members have their say in an individual vote. Of course, when they didn't get the results that they wanted, we've now got people like Tom Watson. Get rid of the members. Let's have it back to a block vote where we can have bureaucrats deciding who's going to be in the shadow cabinet.
Well, when Ed Miliband brought in this, democracy to choose the leader, they welcomed it because they thought, we just get the Daily Mirror and the Sun to tell people what to think, and then we'll get the leader we want, an heir of Blair. But it's completely backfired. And I'll tell you, it's absolutely true that ordinary people are really understanding it. Because on that day when the Virgin train gate, and they said Jeremy hadn't sat in a seat that he could have sat on, because actually they were, reserved seats. Of course he can't. I mean, if an MP sits in a reserved seat, he's going to be in trouble, right? But that, it was cleverly done in the media, right? But I walked in a chippy in Roehampton, and the guy knows me and supports Jeremy, and straight away he started saying to me what he knew was wrong about the story and how it was all lies and how actually they were reserved seats. You know what I mean? So he'd seen through it, and people going in and out have seen through it. And the more they do these things, providing people that watch this programme, for example, are aware enough, in the end the authorities will get undermined and lose out.
That really backfired on them though, didn't it?
It did.
And then a few days later, Branson fell off his bike and it was all forgotten about. But
Yeah. Well, we had people doing loads of selfies on Branson's full trains. Well, over full trains, one should say.
yeah, that was a very good thing that came out of it. People were just posting how overcrowded and terrible the trains were. Yeah, but that's not just the only story that's backfired recently, is it, Piers?
No, well, today, or yesterday rather, we have this Keith Vaz being exposed for having rent boys in his flat. But when that was reported in the Daily Mirror, they put a picture of Keith Vaz beside Jeremy Corbyn to try and make my brother look as if he's somehow associated with... He might have been in the flat, who knows, I mean... But actually, Keith Vaz is a vigorous supporter of Owen Smith. So, they haven't asked the question, was Owen Smith in the flat at the time? I mean, who knows? Just who knows? But they'll use anything to smear my brother. Yeah, actually, I mean...
Well, there's no strategy anymore, is there? It's
Well,
like,
no,
just
they don't
things.
have a strategy. They're thrashing around like mad to do anything to undermine him. But what is happening, because of social media, without social media we would have lost by now. We would have lost. But because of social media, people are beginning to see reality more than they ever have. And, places like Ramsgate, loads of places in Tory heartlands are getting huge rallies in support of my brother, which, would have been impossible without social media, I've no doubt. But it also means that, Jeremy can win a general election. That is what frightens the Blairites. It's not that they say he can't win. No. He can win. That's what worries them. And when they say he's unelectable, what they mean is he cannot be manipulated and bribed. That's what they mean. And with, for example, rail nationalisation, that will be a big issue in southern England.
That's right.
And
Absolutely.
the Tory party is not going to support rail nationalisation. Only Labour under Jeremy will support rail nationalisation. I mean, Owen Smith might say he agrees with it, but he ain't going to damn well do it if he was had a chance anyway. Well, he's finished now, of course, but they'll have another one who they'll put up to propagate nonsense against
He's
Jeremy.
finished. How many of them are they going to have?
It never
They're gonna be
actually started, really.
Well, apparently.
we had Angela Legal, it's landed.
People never landed. And
Sergeant Bilko himself would have been better.
Someone
actually.
smashed a window in the building that she was in and stuff. And it's getting so ridiculous now. But
I mean, I think it's going to be a wearing down tactics myself. I think that they're going to put
war of attrition.
somebody up every year. They're going to try to steal the shadow cabinet. They're trying to steal the administration, and they're just going to try to wear down Corbyn's support, and then probably bring somebody, if they could, like David Miliband back. I think that's probably the long term plan for them, because I think it's like this. When they got Blair in, what they did is they basically nullified the Labour Party.
Yeah,
Labour Party.
absolutely.
Labour Party weren't
He
working
was
for
Tory
working-
Plan B. That's what
He wasn't. They weren't working for working class people anymore, and there was massive disaffection.
And privatisation of the NHS big time through PFI, and we're still paying for it as PFI moves.
Exactly.
And we'll carry on paying for them for another 2 decades.
And the consequence of that was that a lot of people became disillusioned and moved to the right. They moved off to the right. The people like the BNP and UKIP and all these fascist parties. What Jeremy has done is reached out to all those disaffected working class people who the Blairites didn't care
Including
about.
some who support UKIP. When they see sense, they'll
Yeah.
support Jeremy. Because
That's-
they're not inherently racist. Most people that supported UKIP are saying, well, look, I don't like the way the European Union is imposing low wages on me or taking away my industry. It's not racist.
well, I think the
It's just
agenda-led
defending
politics has
interests.
now been really exposed, and that's good because it means that people who listen to Jeremy Corbyn speaking are going to go. It doesn't matter what side you're on or what your political views are. You're going to go. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's no spin there. And I think that's what's defined it. There's no spin. And we're not used to that anymore, are we?
We've been in, I went to a branch meeting the night that Jeremy was actually, because there was a question for a while, was it going to be allowed on the ballot paper? And we had people sitting in that room, and I know some of them had sort of flirted with UKIP, may have voted for them before, and stuff like that. And to a person in that room, everyone said that they were going to support the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn. And that's got to be replicated up and down the country. Thousands of ordinary working class people who no one cared about, they were just taken for granted, and they went off to the right for that reason. I think they're coming back now and seeing that Corbyn is somebody who's actually offering them something. And that's what people vote for. They vote for a party that's offering them something.
Yeah, and it makes sense because, as I say, consensus politics has been exposed. So that's the thing. So what we're going to do, though, to counter this lack of people being able to vote in the Labour Party?
Well, everybody who's got any doubt about their vote, whether if they haven't received it or if they're suspicious about it not actually being in the post, you should phone up the numbers. There are official numbers. You phone them up and register your complaint and demand your right to vote. Now, those who've actually been prevented the right to vote, well, carry on arguing about it. I mean, just argue and argue and argue. And in terms of the general public, everybody involved, carry on talking to the general public. Argue about your vote, but carry on propagating Jeremy's policies to ordinary people that you know. Talk to your friends and say, back Labour under Jeremy Corbyn.
Yes. So the attacks that people are suffering, basically, they're sending their money, they want to vote, and then they're told because they voted for the Green Party 5 years ago, or they liked something on Facebook. This is beyond ridiculous now, isn't it?
What's the hypocrisy as well, isn't it? How can Lord Sainsbury give £2 million to the Liberal Democrats? Say, here are Liberal Democrats, here's £2 million, and also give money to the Labour Party, and as far as I know, he's still entitled to vote. How does that work?
Well, that's £2 million, isn't it?
But the thing about the Green Party is so ridiculous because, I mean, I have a lot of disagreements with the Green Party, that's for sure. But they, on a lot of social issues, they are clear that they support Labour, right? And have done in the past. So to say, well, you supported Green Party or liked them, therefore you don't like Labour. Well, that's nonsense because they can be the same things they're supporting.
Well, to be fair, until Jeremy Corbyn took over the Labour Party, I didn't like the Labour Party. I'll be quite honest with you. I understood there were good people in there, but I wouldn't vote for a Labour Party under Tony Blair, who was attacking the railway industry, who was privatising the railway industry, because we privatised London Underground under the Blair administration. We privatised London Underground engineering. Came back 8.8 billion tax bill for one company for the taxpayers, had to pick it up when they went bust. Another one was 7.8 million, something like that. So we're talking about, in a region of 16 billion pounds that they wasted through that privatisation. That could have been invested in trains and infrastructure. And that's why I wouldn't, and many people like me, wouldn't have voted for a Blair government. It was against our interests as workers to vote for a Blair government.
Absolutely.
But that's what's changed. Many people like us in the railway industry are seeing that Jeremy Corbyn's actually on our side.
Yeah. Well, they've overstepped the mark massively, and that to me was the last straw when I saw those letters that were coming back that people have been excluded. Now people are going to say again, they're saying there's a democratic vote. The whole thing has become so ridiculous now.
Well, democracy's in the counting, not in the voting, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
But I would say, because people see this and think, well, isn't this terrible? But anyone who thinks it's terrible, they should join the Labour Party. Join now. Say, well, I want to be in there fighting for democracy. Because if you're outside, you ain't going to be doing anything.
That's right, and it's those who count the votes that count, so keep an eye on them. That's it from Windows on the World for this section. See you soon. Welcome to Windows on the World. This is a special Windows on the World, and we're going to be talking about the strike which is going on. It's pretty much a nationwide strike on southern trains and a few other places around the country. We've got Steve Headley from the RMT Union joining us in the studio to tell us a bit about what's happening with this strike and why the strike's been called, because in the mainstream media we don't get the full story. So Steve, welcome to Windows on the World.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Mark.
Well, it's great to see you again, and you've been getting attacked from all over the place, as is anybody who seems to be standing up for the rights of workers or the general public these days. So tell us a bit about this strike. Why is the strike being called?
Well, basically, the government and their agents at the Department of Transport have decided that they don't want any guards on the train. And what a guard is, it's a safety critical role. If there's a fire on the train, if a driver takes ill, if there's a terrorist attack on the train, they are the people that evacuate the train. They're also the people that arrange the emergency services. They come and access the track. So it's absolutely crucial that we have guards on trains. Every contract that the government has given out, they're stipulating in it that the guard has to be removed from the train. So we've got this massive row going on with Southern, but what we have really is that the government's behind it all. Similarly, we've got the Southern are trying to close all the ticket offices, and again that's been cleared by the Department of Transport. I mean, you may have seen it on the news that the government have just given Southern GTR, and they're all run by Govia, 20 million in taxpayers' money. And at the same time, Govia have announced that they've made a £100 million profit. And, you know, really you couldn't make this sort of thing up. In other places in the country we're having similar things. We've got Merseyrail, a dispute there, First Great Western, a dispute there, ScotRail, a dispute there, all over the same sort of issues.
Yeah, well, last time we spoke, it was going on for a couple of years ago, and it was about the closure of ticket offices on the Underground, which we've now seen. And this is pretty horrendous, because they're taking away the public's ability to actually buy a ticket, and also this has got to tie in with the health and safety issues, hasn't it?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about that? Why would they be doing this apart from to save money?
Well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the reason. Because we have a lot of stations now around London that people just can't access. If you're disabled, you can't access because there's no one there to help you on and off that train. They've cut the staff in all the stations. It's not just that the ticket office person was there to sell tickets. They were multifunctional. They could do all other duties as well, like platform duties, like help disabled people. And one of the organisations that campaign for disabled people is called DPAC. They're a direct action group. They pointed out that in several stations they could actually be stuck in lifts. Disabled people could be stuck in lifts for up to 30 minutes at a time, because there's no one trained in on the station who would actually be able to access that lift. So we have the knock-on effects, station closures, which London Underground and TfL try to hide. We also have this thing where disabled people now have to book up a lot of times 48 hours in advance if they want to use a tube network or a train network.
Yeah. So I suppose the question would be, how much money do they think they're going to save by doing this?
Well, I think over a period of years it's going to run into millions, but really it's peanuts.
Yeah.
You know, when you think that they've given £20 million to Southern GTR to basically bolster their profits, I think that would employ guards, you know, I don't know, for the next 40 years. It's incredible.
That's kind of why I brought that point up, because it's just such a minuscule amount of money. But what we've seen with the tube stations is, as you're saying, it's so inconvenient now for people. This is against the interest of the public. So I suppose what you're saying is that this strike is really about, is trying to wake people up as well. I mean, obviously you're just going to get slated in the mainstream media for this. So what would you say to the public?
Well, what we'd say to them is, you know, we don't enjoy going on strike. No one joins the railway industry so they can go on strike. And when they go on strike, people lose a day's money or 2 days' money. That's going to happen now. But people, especially the guards and the station staff, feel very, very strongly about this issue. They don't want to see situations where, you know, let's leave aside all the emergencies, which I've just explained, but they don't want people being harassed on trains late at night by drunkards or people that are using other substances. They want women to feel safe on trains. Similarly, at stations, especially on the coast, and even in London, in the outskirts of London, some stations, you know, are very deserted after 6 o'clock on a winter's evening when it's dark. And we don't want the position where people are feeling vulnerable and don't want to use the network because that they're frightened to go on it. So I think it's incumbent upon the government sort this mess out and stop funding Southern and stop giving them directives to carry out these policies.
I think the very important thing here is that public recourse in every way has been taken away from them, you know, because if you are at a station late at night or even early in the evening and there's no one there, then you are pretty powerless. There's nothing you can do. And what do you do then? You phone up an automated helpline.
That the thing is, I don't think they mind. I don't think that the powers that be mind, because they're having record numbers of people on trains anyway. So I don't think that they're going to lose that much revenue. But where it is very dangerous is for those members of the public who are going to be using those stations. You know, if we have an incident now, for example, at King's Cross or Hammersmith or Bank Station, the numbers of staff that have been cut at those stations, I don't think that we're going to get people out safely. I mean, it's only, 10 years ago when we had the bombings in London. And the number of staff at that time, we managed to get people out relatively safely. No one was actually killed in King's Cross itself. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult to achieve that in the future.
Well, yeah, this is the whole point. So they're relying on the fact that there's huge numbers of commuters and they can still make their money. But so what else can you do? What can the unions actually do now? Just let's go into how the powers are being taken away from the unions as well, because I think people need to know that.
Well, just what can people do? I mean, we're fighting it industrially, but I notice a load of commuters and a commuter group are now crowdfunding. I think they've actually nearly raised the amount they take this to the High Court about GTR Southern and the sort of service that they're getting. What's happening with the unions? Obviously, they've got the new anti-union bill, which has come in, and that does two things. First of all, if there's 100 people in your workplace, then 50 of them have to vote in a ballot for the ballot to be even valid. So you could have 49 people voting yes, no one voting no, but that ballot would still be invalid. Second thing you have is a secondary stipulation, is that 40% of the total amount of people have to vote yes. So you could have a ballot, say, that has, 69% turnout, nearly 70% turnout. You could have 39% of people voting yes, 30% of people voting no. And again, that ballot wouldn't be valid. You know, it's obviously, 3/4 of people have voted. So that's the stipulations the government are putting in now, the restrictions on people defending themselves by taking industrial action.
Yeah, well, it's like controlling the narrative, really, isn't it? Because it's this sort of control. You've been victim of it, really. I mean, you've been roundly attacked from all sides, and really, it's not the people within the union are actually getting attacked, really, aren't they? That's what it's really about. Can you go into that and explain how that works? That basically the unions have been infiltrated, and as is every public body, for an intended outcome.
Yeah, well, I mean, what they're trying to do is take away any power that workers have to fight back against the deterioration in their job, be it financially or terms and conditions, their work-life balance. And they're trying to make it with such a situation that they're going to try to really ban the use of strike action without actually having to say that they've banned the use of strike action legally. They make it so difficult for most unions that they won't actually in reality be able to go on strike. So that'll allow them to impose really anything that we want. If you look at it now, for example, 70% of British people want to renationalise the railway. Why isn't that on the government's agenda? It's not on the government's agenda because their strategic interest is that they sell that off to their friends in the trade motor-braking companies, who in return fund the Tory party, make donations to the Tory party. So when we've got that on the one hand, why are they going to let unions upset the apple cart and stop their friends making a profit which they can donate back to their party?
Yeah, it's the big corporatisation of everything, and the people who really lose out are the public, and it happens over and over again. It's happening at every level. So Steve, last word, what would you say to anybody who's criticising the unions at this time?
Well, all I would say is that you have to think in the long term. We didn't join trade unions so that we could upset people and not get them from A to B. We want to do that, but we want to do it in a safe manner. The unions are actually on your side. We're going to be campaigning to bring the railway into a nationalised body, so this multi-billion-pound exercise every year where taxpayers pay in money and it's paid back to shareholders in dividends and not invested in the railway has to stop. I think Jeremy Corbyn has now said he's going to renationalise the railway. We're fully behind that, and we'll be giving them all the support we can.
Thanks to Windows on the World.
Keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World, and we'll see you soon.